To the left, we have the LG C10. To the right, we have the LG C1. And I'll just be going over some of the differences I notice as I go through various kinds of content to give you guys a better idea as to which one is just worth it for the money. Essentially, you want the short answer. The C10 is brighter, the C1 better detail. That's essentially the big difference between these two displays, but we'll go into it a little bit more than that. So when you play demo content like candles or something like that, or you have a scene with a lot of lighting, it's basically going to be like this. The C1 to the right will have tons and tons and tons of detail. You'll see every little thing, and that's great. But the C10 is special because I'm sure you can probably notice that the candles just look a little bit brighter than what you have on the C1, and that's that brightness advantage that you are going to have. Now, also, it has a dedicated HDR effect mode, so we're able to squeeze out more contrast than what's possible on the C1 because it doesn't have that. Not to say that it isn't giving you excellent contrast, it's just because of the ways in which the C10 specifically can throw off luminosity, you're able to get a little bit more than what you have on the C1. An excellent example of this is kind of this picture right here. Notice how the C10 to the left will have more brightness. You'll see, again, just a little bit more of a glow around text, and the background's not as clear. Also, the buildings in the background, well, not the buildings, but more so just this kind of entrance the character or the person is walking out of, is not as clear as you have here on the C1, where you can see all of that stuff very tack sharp. It's basically like if you have a really nice expensive camera and you put a really good lens on. That's essentially what the C1 is basically like. The same internals are there, but it's just very different the way that they represent it. This demo, I think, represents another really good kind of example on just how different these two displays can be. You see, the C10, their red's not the strongest, the C1, their brightness not the strongest. But ultimately, I think they both do complement each other very well. There'll be moments where you're going to see the C1 looking brighter, or not brighter, but the C10 to the left looking brighter, and it's going to look overexposed and stuff like that. That's just because, again, it's just really bright compared to the C1, and that area where you'll see some clipping and some detail that's not actually on my end, that's just the camera's limited dynamic range, but essentially it's really incredible what we have here. But the big thing that for me that I really love, you will not see it here in this scene at all, the reds are so much better on the C1 than on the C10, where they're looking a lot more like an orangish color. So that's one of the really cool things. It's weird though, because it's like it's basically clarity and like color versus just brightness, really, is what I'm seeing as the big thing. I mean, it's hard because as you go to each scene and it happens really fast and you don't pause, it's a lot harder to discern the C10's benefits over the C1 if you're not really focusing on it. Though the luminosity and contrast come through regardless, other benefits are kind of a lot harder to show off. If you look at footage from like the most recent State of Play event, you can kind of see a lot more of the differences between these two displays easier. It's kind of like one is really good at luminosity, which, like, as I look at it with my naked eye, again, don't know what the camera is going to end up showing you, but as I look at it with my naked eye, the luminosity on the C10 is just seriously eye-catching. But then the clarity on the C1 is like, it's just like, when you're wearing contacts, or you need to wear contacts, you put it in and it's clear. It's just, I don't know, man. There's just something about the clarity and the color on the C1 that I think a lot of people will be happy with. But it's a difficult thing because I know a lot of people have to come up with this answer for themselves as to which one of these two TVs are better. There's always $1 million question. For the money, which one should I buy? And honestly speaking, it really is going to change depending on what you watch and how you watch. For example, if you're somebody that watches a lot of movies and you don't really game a whole lot, then maybe you might be better off with something like the LG C10, because motion is still great for movies. It's incredible. And you still have all the same, more or less, that you'd get as far as a gaming suite, V-Sync, you know, your G, or rather your G-Sync and your FreeSync. You know, you have all that stuff. So I can't really say that as a gamer you'd really need necessarily to pay the extra $500. I know a lot of people are asking about that, very curious, like, hey, should I give them the extra $500? Is it really worth it? And I mean, if you're somebody that values brightness, no. That's an unequivocal no. It's just not as bright. If you're somebody that values clarity, absolutely. Not only is the image sharper, but then the motion is clearer, so it's easier to see things. There are just moments where you can run into some panning issues and things get really choppy on the C10. That doesn't happen on the C1 like ever, practically. And that's what makes the C1 so powerful. Unfortunately, though, I will say this, the C1 seems to kind of be a product of the times we're in. And what I mean is, LG knows that they were going to come out with the G1. They obviously want you to buy the G1. So to make the C10 obviously not fly off the shelves and the G1 collect dust, they basically downgraded the C10. That's essentially what they did in terms of brightness. There's no excuse for it, really, in my personal opinion. I think it's pretty jacked up. I think they could have at the very least, made it as bright as the C10. But they're trying to make you really believe that this Evo thing is something so incredibly different. And the only real way that they can do that is by nerfing the experience you had last year. Because truth be told, most people upgrading aren't going to compare to last year's levels of brightness. And the ones that can are just going to be written off as crazy people and dismissed almost immediately, with people saying things like, oh, who buys a TV every year anyway? So it's really a very difficult thing, because on the one hand, you want to kind of clap for LG when they do something right, but then on the other hand, we have to be realistic about what they're not offering as well for the amount of money that we're paying. That's kind of like the kind of perspective that I'm trying to bring into this whole thing. For every pro they give, there is a con you have to realistically weigh up. One of the better demonstrations of what I'm talking about when I say that there's just a difference in terms of brightness between one TV to the other is this right here. As we look at this Gran Turismo demo, I'll try to release my ISO so that you guys can just kind of see the C10 to the left is just going to blow out and be very, very bright. There's not really going to be a whole lot in the way of detail on it, and that's just kind of how it works. Now I'm going to try to make it look normal again so that we can get some sort of normalcy back. It's about there, I believe. I'm not 100 on that, but I'm trying to adjust this as I look at it. But either way, you guys can kind of get an idea. They're both incredible TVs, but if you're trying to make decisions as to which one is worth your money right now, should you just buy a C10 on sale? Again, it's literally going to go back to brightness and contrast versus clarity and everything else. There are some things you'll notice, like in this game, like Avengers. If you look at the A in the background, on the C10, it's going to be brighter. Like that little A back there is going to be brighter than on the C1. The C1 is going to have better contrast, though. These are the little minute, very, very tough to pinpoint details that you're going to notice. Though there are moments where the C1 can also have better contrast than the C10, like now, where you get to like really bright scenes. Well, because the C1 isn't incredibly bright, you don't really have anything holding it back in terms of, you know, quality. It's hard because it doesn't get bright, so you have a lot of detail. But then on the other hand, and other scenes where you could use it, like the darker scenes where you have light bulbs in the back or white text on a black background, the C10 is going to be brighter. And it's a balancing act, I suppose. It's very difficult to say which one of these TVs is ultimately going to be the perfect TV for somebody really seriously looking for movies, gaming, and all that stuff. So I'm trying to show an eclectic amount of stuff here. But essentially, I mean, both TVs look really cool. Like as Thor flies in, the C1 though is really grabbing my eye. It's really cool. I think my ISO is too high. You're really not seeing this as good. I'll try to lower that down. I mean, it looks really crazy cool. And just seeing him fly in with the powers and all that stuff, like this stuff's like incredible. Sorry, the camera went off angle there for a second. I'm just looking at it with my own eyes, and I'm just kind of, because I don't really do comparisons every day. It's not a very normal practice, right? Comparing TVs, but I can tell you that I'm really enjoying it. It looks really, really cool. I don't, I mean, I don't have anything negative to say about either display. They both look really good. C1, very clear right now. And I love the reds on the C1. The reds are like so good. They're like Sony red. So definitely clear that LG has listened to all the negative feedback that I've been giving about those reds over the years, and they're better. They're definitely a lot better. They look a lot cleaner, to say the very least. I enjoyed it a lot. The C10, obviously, the reds are looking a little bit more on the orangish side of things. Don't know if that's going to show through on camera, but like as it's like right here, like this is so dramatic. I don't know if that's going to show though, but hopefully it does. But the message for this video between the LG C10 and the LG C1, just to give you final thoughts on which one you should buy. Look at how you use it, man. Always look at the kind of usage. I know it's very repetitive, but that really is the only true way you're going to find what you're looking for. And of course, guides like these are helpful because maybe you can see enough content in real time and, you know, in a real environment so that maybe you can make a decision that way as well, depending. And then also just kind of vocalizing what I'm seeing, hopefully, is giving you some sort of idea as well as to what you can expect. All in all, I'd say this is a pretty good TV, either way you go. But one thing I will say, make sure you don't update your C1 because I feel like with time, this motion is going to get nerfed because it's way too good. And I feel like that's going to hurt the sales of the G1 and, you know, they can't have that. So it is what it is. I'm personally not going to do any updates to my C1. I have no intention on doing that. I want to enjoy this motion. And I swear, like every TV that I've updated, I've always regretted it. So I'm definitely going to try not to do that this time around. But essentially speaking, between the C1 and the C10, if you wanted my personal opinion, my opinion is that they both are tied, which is why I'm keeping them both, obviously. I can't personally pick between the two. I think they're both incredible. I think they do something very different from one another. You know, the C1 is like a B10 on steroids. And by steroids, I mean like industrial grade, like monster steroids. But, you know, the C10 also has its place. So it's really hard to say who should do what. But, I mean, I don't know, man. Ask me how you use your TV and ask me whatever questions you need, and I'll do what I can to help you out because it's not going to be an easy choice either way you go. But I wanted to give you an idea of how these TVs are hitting. Either way, thank you guys so much for watching the #1 brand in honesty. And until the next video, I'll see you guys later.